All right. Hello, everybody. Good morning. So I told Dan a couple weeks ago, I demand to sing tenor or I'm leaving. And so he told me I had to preach. No, I'm kidding. I do appreciate the opportunity to preach, but of course also to sing with the men. It was nice to do that. So I want to thank the elders for the opportunity to speak in front of you today. I have faith that they are doing all they can to fulfill their promise to fill the pulpit more permanently, and I have full faith that God will send someone to do that, the right someone to do that. It can be pretty intimidating to stand up here and talk. I know other men have done this, and they have said the same. I'm not going to be as capable as Caleb, or as measured as Mark, or even as genuine as Jabari. But I'm here, and I'm going to do my best. Thank you guys for your attention and your blessing on this. So, I'm not trained at speaking, let alone preaching. I don't know my scriptures like some of the older members, and I don't have the energy I had as a kid. So kids, enjoy it while you can, because those things come in handy when you're a young man, especially if you're serving the Lord, or a young woman. But being up on stage is something I'm familiar with. Normally, it's me leading the singing instead, as you guys know. And there's a funny story about how that kind of came to be. So I was raised in the church, and I've always been in love with music. I've always been humming a tune as long as I can remember, a jingle from the TV, something I heard on the radio, much to my parents' dismay as a child. I was the lark in the house that was always singing or doing something I probably shouldn't do that distracted them from what they needed to do. But when I was about 11 years old, the church I grew up in, a gentleman who was the song leader there, one of the song leaders there, said, we went to Sunday night church every week then. He said, I'm going to have a class for song leaders before the Sunday evening service. And if you want your young men or boys to come, please send them. And so, of course, this is 1991, I think, and my parents were very much, you got to go. You like to sing? You're going to sing for them. And so I always sang in church, of course, so I was pretty familiar with most of the hymns, but I went, and there was probably about 9 or 10 of us, different ages, some as young as me, most of them were older, and I told the song leader, I said, I'm going to do this because my parents made me, but I'm never, ever going to be a song leader. Never. And I was adamant. He said, okay, and I said, but I'll learn, I can learn. I'll learn to do what you do. And so we did that every week. And we didn't do anything outside of that. We didn't do anything in the service. But about 2 months in, he said, okay, you guys know what you're doing now. Each of you must pick a song. We're going to do it on a Sunday night. There won't be as big of a crowd. Something that you've been practicing, something that you're comfortable with. And I said, nope. And eventually, all the other men signed up for stuff, or the young boys. And I said, okay, I'll do this one. I was the last one to pick a song, and I was the last one to go up. And I did my song, and true to my word, I didn't do it again for almost a year. And about a year later, before you knew it, I was in the regular rotation at the church at 12. And the rest is history, as they say. So, funny how God plans for us, and they just kind of happen sometimes even if we don't want them to. So I'm going to talk to you about something else today. There was a little town and had 2 churches on the same street. We'll call them Church A and Church B. Church A was a big church, had a fancy building, a nice parking lot, lots of cars parked out in front every Sunday. They were known for strong doctrinal beliefs too, solid preaching every Sunday morning. Worship services were excellent, the music was great, and the members of Church A really knew their Bible. Church is pretty big, but after a while, it got really big. Most members didn't know the other members, and after a while, they didn't know their names either. They came to church, they did church, and then they immediately left and did their own thing with their own people. They would bump into each other outside of church. Hey, I know you, but they didn't know their name. because they went to church together. So in comparison, Church B, just down the street, it was pretty messy by comparison. Their singing was often off-pitch or too slow. The minister was a nice guy, but nobody would have called him eloquent. The building was in disrepair. It needed paint, new carpeting, and reshingling. The parking lot had a bunch of cracks in it. Often it took weeks for minor things to be repaired, like changing even a light bulb. But if someone walked into their fellowship who was hurting or confused or broken, somebody noticed and they went to them. They reached out to every visitor and made sure they knew who they were and how they might help them and how they might get them closer to God and to make them feel loved and welcomed. Then the members sometimes would drift away. Someone was always sure to call them, text them, message them, let them know how much they were missed from their fellowship. And there was no lack of visitation to the infirm who couldn't attend. So one day, a new family moved into this neighborhood. They were looking for a church home. First, they went to visit Church A. They drove by and they saw all these cars and the impressive building, and they went in and they were impressed with the programs, the pastor who was knowledgeable and funny and memorable, and as soon as they had a question about the Bible or their beliefs, there was always someone ready with an answer. They loved the auditorium and how the music swelled and just made them feel closer to God. When they went in, they had someone there at the door who took their information, but they never heard back from them. And so they left, and they were generally pleased with their visit. Next Sunday, they went back to the church, and it was the same thing. They were greeted by the same greeter at the door. The music was good, but a little bit loud. The pastor was memorable. And they said, well, we're going to talk to this pastor afterwards. And so they went to find him. He was hard to find, but there was a crowd of people around him and around him, and they just didn't have time to talk to him, these new people. And so another week goes by, and they said, let's try Church B. So they go down the street to Church B. They were a little bit late, and they park in the parking lot, which they didn't know where to park because the lines were hard to see. They go into the decrepit building, and they're a little bit late. They don't know where to sit, so they just kind of sit in the back. The music was okay. The church members sang from the heart, but not very well. The minister was kind, but not a very good speaker, even if his message was sound. They were asked about their lives. They were made to feel welcome and appreciated, though. Several members invited them to join them for lunch afterwards to get to know them better. It didn't seem like there were a lot of cliques like they remembered from Church A, and the love they had for each other was very evident. Even though there was a lot to like about Church A, they had more programs for them to attend throughout the week. They had more kids the same age as their kids. The music was uplifting, even though it was a little bit loud, hard to sing to. But ultimately, they opted to stay with Church B. Church A had impressed them, but Church B had embraced them. A year later, both churches, they still believed the same things about Jesus that they did before. Church A was still very impressive to look at and go visit with huge attendance. And Church B was still planning to get that coat of paint. But only one of those churches had showed a family who were strangers to them what God's love looks like. In Matthew 22, 36 through 40, Jesus says something that is very profound. When asked the question, what is the greatest commandment in the law by a lawyer, he said to them, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So I use the word profound because Jesus basically takes out the guesswork of how to live a spiritual existence for us in a few sentences. So think about the life of a Jewish rabbi, a scribe, a Pharisee, someone who had dedicated their life to knowing every dot and tittle of the law. Their entire existence was bound up in the law, in the traditions that came from the law, both of man and of God. only to have a man of lowly birth, a carpenter, tell them that getting to heaven is not about obeying the rules. One of the first things Jesus said to the masses in his first sermon in Matthew 5 was that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. See, the solution wasn't in knowing the rules better. It was in loving better. Nothing has changed about that. God is the same as he ever was. His defining characteristic has always been what? Love, right? Think about the people Jesus surrounded himself with. Fishermen, tax collectors, sinners, women of the night. Going back to our opening story of Church A and Church B, where would Jesus have gone to recruit his followers? Would he have gone to Church A that had it all figured out? I think it's obvious he would have gone with Church B. In the book of Revelation, one of Jesus' chosen apostles, the one who referred to himself as the disciple whom he loved, John, he wrote about some churches there. He wrote about two in particular that I want to talk about, Ephesus, and they were devoted to sound doctrine. They were successful. They were patient, hardworking, but they were guilty of leaving their first love. And it was so bad that they were threatened to have their lampstand removed in Revelations 2. In the book of James, it tells us that faith without works is dead. But the lesson of Ephesus might be said that works without love is worthless. In contrast, the other church I want to mention, the church of Thyatira, was praised for their love and their faith, for their service. They were recognized for their spiritual growth and their latter works exceeding the first, is what it says. Their one flaw being the tolerance of a sinful woman, Jezebel, who was seducing the church with sexual immorality. Yes, they needed to root out the problem, but the fact was that God was ready to do that on his own. If you read in Revelations 2, it says that he was going to make her sick and those following her sick and take away her children because she refused to repent. And told the rest of the congregation, just hold fast until I come. So their biggest criticism is one God was going to take care of for them, and their only admonition is, hold fast until I come for you. Imagine getting that message like the church of Thyatira at the end there. Hold fast until I come. You're doing everything right. It would be pretty good to hear that, wouldn't it? Well, what if you had the message of Ephesus for your church? I'm reminded of a song we sing sometimes Wednesday nights. For those of you who attend, we sing often the song, Get Right Church and Let's Go Home. So now you guys are going to think next time I lead that I'm talking about us, right? No. It's a great little song. So when it comes to the subject of love, it's hard not to think about a wedding. Maybe you think about weddings too when the word love gets bandied around. Usually it's just two people starting out at life, or at least a life together. So when you go to a wedding, there's a wedding reception, and they pass around a microphone, or they have a paper they want you to fill out, or a book or something, and you see one question usually. Give us some advice. Give us the advice. And so I'm always very purposeful and say the same thing. Now, Michelle, cover your ears. I always say, refuse to get more than you give. That's the secret to a successful marriage. Refuse to get more than you give. And so I think about the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13 says in verses 4 through 7, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant nor rude. It does not insist on getting its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and it endures all things. That's pretty beautiful stuff, right, family? But it's also very convicting. The Bible is not called the sword of truth for nothing. I can't look at that list of stuff I just read in 1 Corinthians 13 and then look at myself without feeling a little bit ashamed, if I'm being honest. Are you impatient with people? Have you ever been unkind to someone who didn't deserve it? That isn't love. Do you struggle with being prideful, arrogant, or rude? That isn't love. Do you demand to have things your own way? Are you often irritable? Is your heart ever full of resentment or even bitterness? That isn't love. Have you ever secretly delighted in something sinful or hidden the truth from anyone? That isn't love either. Or do you have the kind of love that bears up when things get tough, that never gives up in hope, that always endures no matter how hard things might become for you? If you can't answer yes to this last part, maybe you're like me and we just needed to be reminded. So here's a very hard truth. Nobody ever loved someone by accident. It's something you must make intentional to do. Colossians 3, verse 8 and following says, put on then as God's chosen ones, actually verse 12, put on then God's chosen ones, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And then let the peace of Christ rule in your heart, to which indeed you were called as one body. And be thankful. Brethren, we are called to be intentionally loving to each other. And then it will only be natural that this love that we have for each other overflows to the people outside of this building and to the people who come into this building. Not only will it help us grow in numbers and in spirit, it tells us that the peace of Christ will rule in our hearts. We just read it. I don't know about you folks, but I could do with a little more peace. In the 1950s, they did a study of a small town in Pennsylvania named Roseto. It was a health study. Most of those residents smoked, they had poor eating habits, and rarely exercised. But doctors were astonished to find that they had little to no heart disease in the community. What they did find was that every person in town, almost every person in town, was part of a loving family. The elderly were cared by their families and stayed at home. The young people had strong moral upbringing, and they were active in the church and in the community, as were the middle-aged people. They had a strong sense of community, and almost nobody, was isolated or alone. As time caught up with the city of Roseto, eventually those things changed, and they noticed that the health patterns changed as well, that they started having the same numbers as other places did as far as the health and heart disease. But it was proven that love doesn't only shape our faith, it can actually shape our lives. I'm sure you've heard this before, but during the early church in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the known world, the Roman Empire, was ravaged by plagues. Weakening the Roman Empire, many people, including doctors, fled to be isolated for safety, but Christians, they did the opposite. They stayed behind. They cared for people, even those who were non-believers. They buried the dead, and many healthy Christians died because of their love and care of their fellow man. Even the pagan population, notice the Roman emperor at the time was quoted as saying, Christianity will always grow because it loves people better than our religion ever will. The early church didn't experience its greatest growth because it shouted its ideology in the street. It grew because it knew the value of love when it mattered the most. Civil rights activist Martin Luther King said once, We must discover the power of love. It is the redemptive power. Isn't that the truth? When there are so many people ready to hate, sometimes just blindly, we need that power. All you have to do is go online. I encourage you never to go onto Threads, but all you have to do is go online, and you will see people who revel with hate in every breath they have. And there are religions around the world, old religions, who persecute Christians even today. They want to see Christianity die and go away. There's a particular religion that is infuriated by Christianity. Why? Because love always wins. It's the secret weapon of Christianity. You cannot scare the love out of someone. You cannot threaten and intimidate love out of someone. You cannot kill the love out of someone who is determined to love. Jesus said in Luke 12, verse 4, I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body, and after have nothing more that they can do. But I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he has killed, has authority to cast you into hell. If you believe the words of Jesus and have faith in him, the natural result is to have a love that nothing on earth can kill. It's a kind of love that draws others to it, that leaves a legacy in your family, in your community. How do I know that? Because Jesus himself died loving all of us, even the ones who killed him. And look what happened afterwards. The mightiest kingdom that has ever been and ever will be. Praise God. We serve a great faith, a mighty warrior king. We have nothing to fear. And once we cast out fear, the result is going to be a loving heart, ready to heal others. And of course, peace. Sweet, sweet peace. 2025, it was a rough year for so many people. Mine had its share of heartaches and problems, but it ended with a peace like I have never known in all other years at the end of the year. Maybe 2025 was the first year you found peace after the COVID pandemic. Maybe it was the year where you found peace with the politics of our day. Maybe it was the year you found peace with the family struggle. Maybe 2025 is the year you found peace with yourself and the things that you were going on inside of you. Maybe the greatest gift that love gives us isn't all the answers, but peace. Peace that passes understanding. So if you didn't find that kind of peace at the end of 2025 like I did, maybe this is the year you will get it. Maybe 2026 is going to be the time to make it right. But remember, we said that love had to be intentional. You won't get peace by accident any more than you will love someone by accident. So let's revisit Church A and Church B. The first one was a big church who seemed really successful on the outside, and the other, the quiet church, was doing the things that really mattered. Church A had a full fellowship, but their hearts were empty. Church B had challenges and hardship that Church A never did, but they had the one thing that mattered the most, and they followed a simple rule: to love no matter what. So I will tell you, as active and busy as my family is sometimes for the Lord, I struggle too. I wonder sometimes if any of this is worth the effort. I have my moments of doubt and of self-doubt. I often have a pretty horrible prayer life. Many days I would rather stay in bed than out doing something that I should for God or for helping others. So why stay? Why not go to a big church that has all the answers? Why not go to a Church A, all the programs, and it runs like a well-oiled machine where I can sit and enjoy worship and never have to go on stage again, even when I'm losing my voice? I would just be another face in the crowd. I wouldn't have to encourage anyone or shake anyone's hand if I didn't want to, or listen to anyone's problems if I didn't want to. I could live a quiet life and keep trying to be a good person and that be enough. The reason I care about this body here at the Turlock Church of Christ is for two reasons. I know the truth. This is God's people. I see it in their commitment, in their lives. And because as a child, the church always stepped up to help me and my family. That's the second reason, whether it was because we couldn't pay a bill or because the strife was in the home. Yes, in my home as a child, there was strife. Somebody always stepped up and loved us. Maybe it was the deacon who held my mother's hand while we were at the hospital at 2 a.m. Maybe it was the person who let us stay in their yard in a tent when we didn't have anywhere to go. I saw so many people sacrifice their time to help me, not only with those things, but with the spiritual things to help me grow. There was Carlos Aguilar, the man who taught me how to read the Bible right and who gave me my first Bible and left to have his own church to preach at, and I never saw him again. There was Saul Melindo, the quiet Mexican man who always dressed nice, always had a smile on his face, who taught me that faith lasts even beyond the grave. There was my great-aunt, Frances Thornhill, who studied with me when I wanted to be a Christian, helped me learn the gospel and what that change was going to mean for me, who took us in when we had nowhere else to go. My debt isn't to those people, it's to God. And I can never pay that debt. And those people, they wouldn't want it any other way. God sees my works, but maturity is knowing that only they matter when I do them with love. Love the Lord with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. It all comes back to that, doesn't it? Jesus promises us, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. All we need to do, folks, is just let go. Let go of all the junk that we hold on to. Make space for a heart full of love, filled with peace. I need that. You need that. I'm ready. I'll leave you with a quote about church life from an unknown author. The world isn't asking if we are the right church. It's watching to see if we are a loving church. Before I got up here, we sang the song, unCommon Love. If we have that kind of love for each other, I think we have a very uncommon thing. So I'm ready for an uncommon love. I hope you are too. If you have come here today and you have a need and you don't have enough love, or you want peace that only the love that we talked about can give you, today is the day. Okay? If you need to recommit your life to God, today is that day. If you need to take on Jesus and his blood in baptism because you've never done it, you know what the Bible says about it. Today is the day. Okay? If you're subject to the invitation, please stand as we sing.